quarterbacks coach, Billy Musgrave, was a teammate of Deion Sanders in San Francisco and also was in Shedeur's corner. So there was support within the organization, but they never imagined that he would be there in round 5. And when he was, they moved up, they traded up, and they now have 5 different named quarterbacks going into training camp.
Yeah, including Dillon Gabriel, who, of course, they picked ahead of Shedeur in this very draft. J-Mac, what do you think about the quarterback situation in Cleveland, that QB room there?
I look at Cleveland and saying, hey, let's throw as many names in that project as possible at that quarterback position. I think the part of it that we're leaving off is now they have another first-round draft pick for next year, including their own, so they'll have 2. So if it doesn't work out, they could be back to the drawing board next year. But I look at this for Shedeur Sanders. Yes, you didn't want to go in the 5th round. You like to go a lot higher. But you end up in a situation where they don't have a starting quarterback. He gets to walk in there and compete to be the guy. Joe Flacco will be the veteran in the room. Kenny Pickett is still trying to prove himself. And we mentioned Dillon Gabriel along with himself, and then Deshaun Watson, who's coming off of an injury. So for Shedeur Sanders, you get an opportunity to walk in this building and prove all 32 teams wrong, because the Cleveland Browns pass on him multiple times as well. You get to go in there with a chip on your shoulder and prove you can be an NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, I'm looking at this as a quarterback competition between Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel. Obviously, you got the 2 vets in there. We know who they are. Joe Flacco, obviously Cleveland knows very well. Kenny Pickett at this point has played quite a bit of football. But the Browns clearly loved Dillon Gabriel, right? This was a pick that surprised a lot of folks. But I could see why. I mean, watching him, and I watched him a great deal in college, but especially at Oregon, there are a lot of attributes that make sense in the Browns offense. He's accurate. He's great off of play action. He's good throwing on the move. He's got a quick release. I think where Sanders has an edge over him, and this is why I had Sanders ranked higher in my perspective on draft quarterbacks, is he's obviously taller, and I think he sees the middle of the field better, which is important in Kevin Stefanski's offense. But he's got to beat out Gabriel, right? Like, it's not just that they drafted Gabriel 2 rounds ahead of him. I watched a video of them talking to him. They clearly love the kid. So that's task number 1. You know, you got to take these things in order of steps. And step 1 is that competition between Sanders and Gabriel.
I think I can't help myself. I kind of have to close the book here on how Shedeur got to round 5, and it was something that I didn't anticipate as we got closer and closer to the draft. I was surprised he was still available as we got into round 3, much less day 3. But there are some important lessons learned throughout this process, one of which is me, Mel, other draft analysts don't determine where a player is going to go in the draft. We have a suggestion, we have a belief, we have a projection, but we do not make that decision. Your tape and your pre-draft process determines where you go in the NFL draft. And the NFL spoke very loudly and clearly about Shedeur Sanders. In fact, the Browns did themselves by making him the 2nd quarterback they took. First of all, the tape wasn't good enough for NFL teams to view this player as a starting quarterback option. That's an error in my evaluation. I had more optimism than the NFL did. Beyond that, the NFL said that some of the stuff that surrounds Shedeur Sanders does not make us as comfortable as other quarterbacks in this draft class do. It ends up being this perfect storm. It leads to a player who I thought would go maybe as soon as the 1st round, going 144th overall, and the 6th quarterback in this draft class taken, where I thought the lowest he would be the 3rd quarterback taken. So I understand why there are limitless questions and people saying, how on earth did you guys think he was going to go so soon? Clearly this was a miscalculation, but hopefully for Shedeur's sake, he takes it and acknowledges some of the things that led up to this and can learn from it. Because if not, then he probably won't be a real factor in Cleveland, because he's got to beat out 3 other guys just to have a shot to be a starter.
Yeah, it is the beginning of a fascinating story for Shedeur Sanders in what we hope will be an NFL career for him. We'll see how it all ends up. But one of the most notable teams that passed on Shedeur was the Steelers. Here's a look at their draft. They had just 2 picks in the top 120. They took Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon in the 1st round, and then running back Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round. 4 of their final 5 picks were on the defensive side of the ball. The lone exception, quarterback Will Howard in the 6th round. He joins Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson in the QB room. Adam, the Steelers said they would be adding 2 quarterbacks. We saw them from the draft. They drafted Will Howard. What are their plans from here?
Well, there's one, and I think they're hoping and thinking and believing that the last one will be Aaron Rodgers. Art Rooney, the owner of the team, said over the weekend that he still was optimistic that Aaron Rodgers was going to wind up in Pittsburgh, hopefully sooner rather than later. But there is patience within the organization. Mike Tomlin, the Steelers head coach, has not been in any rush to get a decision from Aaron Rodgers, but really the Steelers are the last team that remains that needs a quarterback here for the upcoming season. And Aaron Rodgers clearly would like to continue playing, though he said on the Pat McAfee show he hadn't made that decision just yet. But it's a situation where I think the Steelers believe ultimately he'll come around, he'll wind up opting to play, and he'll wind up opting to play in Pittsburgh. The other team that seemingly interested Aaron Rodgers, the Minnesota Vikings, traded for Sam Howell over the weekend. They would seem to have satisfied their need for another quarterback with Sam Howell and that acquisition. And now that leaves the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers waiting to join forces. It still could be a little while before he signs him, but I think the belief within the organization is that he still will come around and wind up this season in Pittsburgh.
All right, so we keep waiting for that. Adam, Mina, what do you think of how the Steelers approached the draft, only taking Will Howard in the 6th round?
I would have taken a quarterback earlier, just to be blunt. I don't begrudge them skipping on quarterback in the 1st round. I actually love the Derek Harmon pick, player I really liked at a position of need for them. But after that, they had a couple of opportunities, I think, to take a swing on one. Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round, they took a running back, Caleb Johnson. And then in the 4th, instead of taking Sanders, they took Jack Sawyer, who gives them edge depth. But the way I see it, Laura, if you're a team without a long-term answer at quarterback, and I think we can agree even if the Steelers add Aaron Rodgers, they still don't have a long-term answer. You got to take some swings. People say, well, they can go for it next year. Well, frankly, we're talking about a team that never picks in the top 10 because they don't lose that many games. And they're also in a division that just loaded up on draft picks for next year. So I don't see that as a plan. I don't see Aaron Rodgers as a long-term plan. And I just wish they had been a little bit more aggressive at the position.
I thought the Steelers' intentions or their feelings about Shedeur Sanders became crystal clear for me at pick 83 in the 3rd round. When they didn't take him at 21, you're saying to yourself, I get you. Derek Harmon's an excellent player who led all FBS defensive tackles and pressures last season. That is one where it's a premium need for them in a premium position, even if not at the level of quarterback. Once they bypassed Shedeur Sanders at 83, the message to me was very obvious. We're not interested in this player. We just don't view him as a draftable quarterback at this point, which probably means their grade for him is below that of a starter level. So I was actually okay at that point with them waiting until the 6th round because I didn't think the gap between Will Howard and a lot of the quarterbacks that went ahead of him was really a gap at all. As a matter of fact, I had Wills with a 3rd round grade in this draft, so I thought it was a good investment for Pittsburgh. I just am most nervous about this is that, there's a lot of optimism repeatedly from the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. What's the wait, though? I mean, this has been multiple months of Aaron Rodgers seemingly having one suitor left over and no deal has been put to paper. Again, it's not like there's mini camps or training camp that he's missed out on, J-Mag, but still I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if it can't get done, we're not in the era where he needs to go, you just sign a signature on whatever, an iPad, and we're good to go, I thought.
Well, and Adam just said, it could take a lot longer. I know how I would feel if I were in that locker room, but if you're a player in the Steelers locker room right now and this is your quarterback situation, how are you feeling?
You're sitting around waiting for that first team meeting, and you're kind of looking at each other, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and it feels like deja vu where you continue.